everyone, welcome back to the Blue Balloon Theatre podcast with me, your host, Rebecca Fithian. I am the Artistic Director of Blue Balloon Theatre, as many of you will now know. And I hope you've been enjoying the podcasts that have been going up recently. They go out every Friday. And today's guest is a very, very special guest indeed. It is none other than Adam Martyn. Adam.
Hello, everyone.
So for so many of you, I imagine, that follow our work, you will have seen Adam's face pop up many, many times on our socials. Adam is an actor and a YouTuber, and you do loads, really. You do lots of different things.
Yeah, I try and keep my fingers in as many pies as possible. I think that's partly just from when we were, for listeners who don't know, me and Becca met at LIPA at University Drama School. That's where we met and we trained together. And I think it was instilled in all of us just the idea of, just because you study in acting, that doesn't have to be like your only thing, and not even in just a work sense, just in a life sense. I think the old school of actors, I think the training was more, you're learning to act to do acting. Like that is what you will do. Whereas I think with us, and hopefully it's continued with like newer generations as well. But no, I do think, keeping your fingers in as many pies as possible is crucial, really. Partly for our sanity, if not anything else. Because even if we did the thing we loved, the most exclusively, you do want a bit of variety in your life, a bit of spice in your life. As some famous band, I was going to say, as the famous band once said.
Yes. And I think you're absolutely right. I know for Blue Balloon, and you know me very, very well, I'm constantly jumping between projects. I kind of thrive when I've got multiple things going on. And I think that kind of comes through in the work that both myself and Jazz does with Blue Balloon. And we're always kind of looking for the next project, wherever that is, wherever it takes us, whatever it might be. We don't limit ourselves to, just theatre or just poetry. We're kind of interested in creatives, full stop. And if we can support them in any way, then we will. But yeah, I mean, that was such a lovely introduction. So, I mean, for a lot of people that may be listening and if they don't know who you are, Adam, tell us a little bit about you as a creative and how you got into being an actor and a YouTuber as well, because how many subscribers have you got now?
I'm around 45,000, which is always really humbling. It's still like in the grand YouTube world, it's a very small drop in a very large pond, but I'm very grateful for my audience and the fact I'm able to do it. And to answer your question with acting, it may come across as a bit of a shock, especially if you know me like now, but I was quite a shy child growing up. Not quite sure why. But yeah, I was I found it difficult to talk to people or just to put myself out there. And that all sort of changed when I was about 9 years old, I'd say. I was partly influenced by the stuff I was watching on the telly at the time. And a big shift for me was Doctor Who. Now, again, if you know me, that comes as no surprise. I'm a big Doctor Who fan, but I was at the right age, I think, when the show came back with Christopher Eccleston, and it was that whole new generation and stuff like that. And I just found it really cool that this guy, as in Eccleston, like you as you do when you're a kid, you sort of strangely believe that he is this time traveling alien, and then when you sort of realize, oh no, he's an adult who is like playing this character, I found that quite appealing and quite exciting. And I don't know why really, but then it coincided with our what year was I in? Year 4 or 5 Christmas show. We were doing Christmas Carol, a very abridged version, mind you. We're talking like 12 pages of script. But they said, okay, if anyone wants to read for Ebenezer Scrooge, then, put your hand up and have a go. No idea why, but I put my hand up and gave it a shot and got the part. So that was my first acting role, being Scrooge in my a role that, funnily enough, basically haunts me throughout my acting career, because I've played him. How many times have I played him now? I've played him twice more since then. Granted, one of them was still at school. I think it was I was in year 10, but it was a full production. It was like the the one extracurricular show that the school had the budget to put on. So it was on the stage, lights, sound, music, etc. So I played Scrooge there at the ripe old age of 14. And then he was also my first post drama school job. I did a schools tour around the UK, and it was several different shows. There were shows about like road safety, shows about just like safety generally in schools, about teenagers, stuff like that. But for the GCSE division, because I don't know if it still is, but Christmas Carol at that time was being taught as part of the English GCSE. So we did it for GCSE students. And I had to play Ebenezer Scrooge again at the ripe old age of 21. So yeah, never the right age. I'm sure it won't be the last time I take on, but it's a fun part to play. But anyway, long-winded answer. But then yeah, ever since that first show, I just took an interest in acting. And as I got older, like a lot of us, that develops into Saturday drama classes and doing shows that way, and then taking it for GCSE, taking it for A level, and then applying to drama school. I was very lucky to get into Lipper. I was 18, so it was the first try. I was on the reserve list. I will point that out, so I had to do a bit of the waiting game. But as anyone will tell you, like I think anyone who gets to go to drama school at 18 is very fortunate, because I do think there are valid reasons why they don't take 18-year-olds a lot. That argument of you haven't really had chance to live a lot of life outside of home and school. Like I completely get that. But yeah, did my training there, met the host of this podcast, um, and yeah, had a great 3 years and have just been doing stuff ever since. And then with YouTube, it's a bit more of a fractured history, I guess. I think I started my channel, it was around September of 2012. I know we've just had the date. So I was still at school then, but I'd never started it with the aim of, oh, I'm going to be a YouTuber. This sounds really nerdy and very niche, but I still do, to be fair. I love a good like collection video. Like if someone's got something to show off, whether that's like movies or like music, any sort of collection. I love someone just going around and showing off what they've got. I found it fascinating. So I thought, oh, well, I've got a few collections. I'd love to do that. And I made all the basic, YouTuber's first video. I filmed it on my phone at the time, which was a decent phone, but I for some reason I left the flash on in those first few videos. It's so bad. The glare's everywhere. The audio is horrible. There's no editing. Like it, you look back now and you're like, yeah, that's a first video. But I think a lot of people who do YouTube have that. You learn as you go. I did videos ad hoc, didn't really do that many when we were at uni because of time. I mean, anyone who goes to drama school, how intense that course is. It wasn't really until I graduated, and I guess mainly to fill time between jobs, I just started making stuff that I was interested in. Like I'm a big fan of TV history and just lots of different things, really. Lots of things that don't correlate into one neat theme or genre, but I always treated YouTube, and still try to treat it as a hobby. If I want to make a video about X, Y, or Z, I'll do that. And if people watch it, great. If people don't, cool. And then, yeah, I think it's only really been since, when did I start taking it seriously is the wrong word. I think I started, I don't want to say it's a job. A lot of people would look at what I do and like with my YouTube output and say, oh, this is basically your job. I try not to categorize it as that, because I think the moment I start doing that, it's going to stop being fun, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So but if you want to say when did it start leaning more towards like a regular schedule and all that sort of stuff, I think it was really the pandemic that inadvertently kickstarted that. Because I mean, a lot of us creatives, I'm sure some of your listeners will sympathize, like, all of our work dried up. We were at a bit of a loss. Some of us were lucky to get furlough, some of us weren't. And I think the first prevailing challenge was, right, we've got all this time. What the hell do we do with it? And for me, my first instinct was, well, I've been making videos, but I guess I can just make them more often or just spend more time. And there was about a 5-6 month period during the pandemic where I was uploading every single day. Not quite sure how I managed that. I think the videos were shorter back then for a start, so that helped. But yeah, but I've had breaks and stuff here and there, and sometimes when acting work takes precedence, like when I did Pantomime last year, I think I barely uploaded any. I did like the odd thing, but I could spend a lot less time on it because say if I was doing a morning and afternoon show, I'd have my evenings, but then you've done two full on panto shows and you're knackered, so you just want to sit down, eat Pringles, and watch the telly. So yeah, I try and be reasonable with it, and I think not treating it as a job helps because I think if I saw it as a job, even if I'd done two panto shows, my head would go, right, now you have to record a video because this is your job. Whereas treating it as a hobby, I'm like, well, no, I don't feel like recording today, so I won't. And I think I've thankfully cultivated an audience that appreciate that because not all YouTube audience, it depends the kind of people who watch. You can never predict that. But I think when you develop a good understanding with your audience, when you keep in like an open communication with them, it really helps. Those were two very long-winded answers. I'm very sorry. But I just feel like there isn't really a succinct way of telling it without doing it justice, if that makes sense. If I'd have just said, oh, well, yeah, I started YouTube and now I have like this following, it sells it a bit short. So if you're still here, listeners, well done.
Now, I kind of love that about you is that you're always so like I want to say level-headed about it. You're very humble about it as well, and you're very grateful for the community that follow you on YouTube, on X, Twitter.
Mm.
But you're also very, I think, realistic with the time you can spend on it. You never sort of berate yourself for not making a video on a day that you thought you would or things like that. And I think, like you say, you do. I don't know how you've managed it really, but you've kept it a hobby. And it just so happens that people tune in, quite a lot of people tune in to sort of enjoy that as well.
Mm.
And for anyone that doesn't know Adam's kind of content on YouTube, I would highly recommend that you do check him out and check out his videos because they are very eclectic. There's a lot about broadcasting history, BBC, Doctor Who. There's now reviews if you're into your music. I mean, you love music. I cannot even tell you, dear listeners, how many vinyl Adam has. He is such an avid music fan, especially the 80s. I mean, who doesn't love 80s music? But no, that's really interesting to like hear your kind of journey into being a creative, into creating YouTube videos and online content. Um, let's briefly chat about your journey as an actor because obviously I'm very aware, both being your friend and now your partner. Like I've kind of seen your journey in a really sort of front row seat kind of way. But
Aye.
you've had you've had a really interesting journey like post graduation. You were involved in a musical called
Yes.
No Horizons. We did speak about that when you were on Be Inspired, our last podcast. Do go and have a listen, guys. It's you've got like a backlog of podcast episodes to listen to. But we chatted about that, and since then you've done a lot of audio dramas with Big Finish Productions.
Mm.
How was that?
I mean, that was great. I mean, I've always been aware of Big Finish as a Doctor Who fan, but I think growing up, because you don't have much money, disposable money as a kid, I could never really afford to collect the CDs as they were then, like consistently. But I was always aware of them, and then as I got older, I started listening to more. And I love audio drama as a medium anyway. I know some people say they can't take to it, and that's valid. But for me, I find it really easy to imagine the world that I'm hearing in my ears. I find that quite easy to do. So really, my involvement with them came about by accident. I was chatting. This is again during the pandemic. I started up my own podcast at the time called AMTV Radio, which is similar to your podcast here, just interviewing creatives or people that I wanted to chat with and all that sort of stuff. And one of them was a lovely lady called Helen Goldwyn, who has done all sorts of Big Finish. I believe her earliest thing, she was an actor for them in the early days, and then she's gone on to write for them, direct for them, all sorts of stuff. And she's a lovely human. But anyway, I had a chat with her. And then I think, I never remember this. I think it was after we finished recording, we just had a little chat between ourselves as actors and stuff. And I mentioned that the musical I was meant to do, as you said, No Horizon, featured a character who was blind, like visually impaired. And for your listeners, I'm visually impaired myself. I'm not blind, but I've always had a visual impairment since I was born. But we won't get. I'm not going to give you my medical history tour. But essentially, I mentioned that to Helen, and she said, "Oh, obviously that's interesting to hear. Hope the show goes ahead." And then about 6 months later, I get an email from her saying, "Oh, by chance, there's this part's come up in this story that I'm going to direct of a character who's visually impaired. Would you be up for it? Because I feel you could sort of bring your own experience to this part." And I says, "Well, yeah, of course. Like the chance to be involved with Big Finish is great." I had no idea then what range it was for, who I'd be acting alongside, but I just wanted to be a part of it because Big Finish don't just do Doctor Who, they do a bunch of other non-Doctor Who stuff, but obviously I guess Doctor Who is the biggest range. And then about a month later I get a call from Helen saying, "Yeah, like we've signed it all off. We'll send over the contract and the script. Do you want to know which Doctor you'll be with?" So I was like, "Oh wow, it is a Doctor Who." And she said it was Christopher Eccleston, and my mind exploded because, as I said, like that was my first Doctor Who, and that was my big introduction to acting. So the chance to act alongside this man was huge, and I think I was very lucky as well because at that time we still had various COVID restrictions in place. So I think in the cast of that first one, I think there was six of us, but they could only have three in the studio. And I'd said, because I got asked, I said, if it's easier for me not to be there because I was based in Yorkshire, they were recording in London. If it was easier for me not to be there, then I'll happily do it from home. But thankfully they wanted me there. So it was me, Chris, and a lovely man called Harky Bambra who played my character Callan, his lovely dog Doyle. And we just had a great laugh. It was like three lads who'd known each other all their life. And we had a bit of fun because Harky's originally from Leeds, I'm from Doncaster, so two Yorkshire lads, and Chris is from Salford, so Lancashire lads. So it was like, War of the Roses all over again. But no, it was lovely. Like a really positive working environment. And I've been lucky enough to do two more audios with Big Finish. And every time I've gone, it's super chilled out. We get the work done, but it's super chilled out. Everyone's dead nice to work with. So if you're a creative out there, you can send them your voice reel, I believe. If you look on their website, there is still an email I think you can send your voice reel to. And, that doesn't instantly mean you're going to get picked up, just to keep it real, because I think I'd sent my voice reel to them long before I had a chat with Helen. And it will just be, they'll be going through the scripts and be like, right, we've got a character from, I don't know, from Wales, right? Whose voice reel have we got? Who's what? Do you know what I mean? I think that's how they'd go about it. But no, it was a dream come true to be involved in the Whoniverse in some way, and it's very weird and very humbling. I went to an event this year called Big Finish Day in London, and I went as a fan, like as a regular customer. I wasn't an invited guest or anything like that. And it was just a day celebrating Big Finish, and they had a bunch of the doctors and the actors to where you could get signings and all that sort of stuff. And I was just humbled by the amount of people who came up to me and said, "Oh, you're Adam Martyn. You play Callan Lennox. Can you sign my CD? Can you sign my book?" And I'm like, "I'm not here as a guest. Like I'm just here as a fan." Obviously, I'm more than happy to do it, but it's very humbling when even when you're at an event where you're not a guest, you're not part of the attractions, that people are still so lovely when they come up to you and tell you about how they enjoyed your work. So yeah, very humbling, very grateful to be a part of the Whoniverse, and who knows, more adventures might come in the future. Who's to say?
I love that. And for anyone that hasn't listened to those audio dramas, do go and check them out. They're genuinely really good. I think they were like the first proper audio drama that I'd given a chance to and actually sat down and listened to with kind of no other distractions, because something for me is I'm like pretty certain that I have ADHD. So distractions are very prominent for me. Like I often can't hold my focus on tasks or certain things for long amounts of time, which is kind of why I'm always working on lots of different things. But I sort of said to myself, like, Adam's in this, I really want to soak it all in and listen to it from start to finish. And the quality of your performance, as well as the whole production, was just superb. And I mean, I remember finding out that you were working with Christopher Eccleston, and I was beside myself because I was very similar to you in that he was my first Doctor and he will always be my favourite Doctor. And I think for me as a young as a young girl from Manchester, sort of hearing a very similar voice of Chris Eck, who's from Salford, hearing those dulcet tones,
Hmm.
it sort of made sense for me to go, oh, he's from my neck of the woods. Like
Yeah.
that I have that connection with him, and it just so happened that he was my first Doctor. So hearing you act with him and in such a brilliant way. I mean, your voice is fantastic anyway. You
Oh,
have
thank
such
you.
a characterful, resonant voice. And when I hear you do, your work on YouTube or your podcast or the dramas with Big Finish, there's always been that quality of you have a very interesting voice to listen to. So to me, at least, it makes complete sense that you were given that opportunity. But it's all about who you know, isn't it? It's always about being in the right place, the right time, making those connections, and how you get work. Most of the time is about who you know. And yeah, I cannot recommend them enough because, like I say, for me, audio dramas, I don't know about you, Adam, because I feel we're quite different with this, but I never really gave them much of a chance. Like, I think I was always interested in voice acting, like
Yeah.
especially for like film, animation, for a character. And since graduating, I've been fortunate enough to voice an animated character. And even though it was a very small job, like it was for a demo of a game, I just remember thinking, oh my God, like this is the most amazing thing. And it was a memory that I will probably treasure for a very long time. But
Hmm.
I think for you, you've always had that interest in audio books, audio dramas, voice acting. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, I would say that's true. I think it stems from when I was really young, about around the age of 4. Me and my family were moving back to the UK, so we were traveling a lot. And obviously, when you've got a 4-year-old, it's like, oh God, we're in the car a lot. How do we keep them occupied? But I remember getting because this is going back some years, folks. I had my Sony Walkman, and
Oh,
I know, and a bunch of cassettes. And some of the cassettes I remember very clearly were not audio dramas, but they were people reading children's books, audio books, I guess you'd say. And I think you still need that same thing you have with audio drama, where you can picture the world that's being told to you. And I remember this is a book. I don't know if anyone remembers this book series, but I remember it so vividly. It was called, what was it called? It was called Little Wolf's Book of Madness, and it was
right.
about this young wolf who went to his uncle's house, who was the big bad wolf, to learn about how to be a big bad wolf. And it was obviously for kids, but I remember it was read by an actor called Griff Rhys-Jones, who just had such a iconic or such a distinguishable voice. And I remember that voice really helped transport me into that world. Another key example was, as I got a bit older, I had the Harry Potter books read by Stephen Fry. Again,
Oh,
on cassette, mind you. We hadn't quite progressed to CD. So, which one was it? Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, I think it was one of those later ones. That was like 14 cassettes. Trying to carry that around in your little backpack was such a nightmare. But anyway, went through a few batteries. All I remember is he'd get to like the end, and you'd have the end of the sentence, a little pause, then you'd hear Stephen go, please turn to side 2B, and all that sort of stuff. So, but again, I think Stephen's delivery, his voice, the way he read the books really got my imagination fired up. So I credit those really, I think, for my interest in voiceover work, audio drama, all that sort of stuff. Ironically, I haven't listened to like an audio book in quite some time. I think to tie it in, I guess, with YouTube, the last one I listened to was by a guy called James Rolfe, who's an American. And if you know that name, then you might know that he is famous on the internet for his series, The Angry Video Game Nerd. Now, that is as nerdy as it sounds. The basic premise is he plays this character, the nerd, who reviews awful games, like terrible, terrible games from back in the day, and gets really angry about them. And I'm telling you, back then, like when he came out, like 2006, 7, 8, there was nothing else like it on. This was early YouTube. This was like revolutionary. He had a background in film studies, so he was using like proper effects and camera techniques and all this sort of stuff. It was and he's still making episodes now, amazingly, 20 years later. And I credit him really as a lot of my inspiration for YouTube as well. Just that because he introduced me to not just like old video games, which I have a passion for, but he also has a big passion for movies, and I love like old movies as well. And through him, I'd learn about like the golden age of Universal horror from the 1930s, or the sci-fi B movie boom of the 50s, or Hammer horror of the 60s and 70s. Like there's just so much media, games, music, film. I credit to James for introducing me to. So his was probably the last book I listened to because he read it himself. And I think people like that when it's the author of like a biography reads it themselves, because they can inject something a lot more personal than anyone else can. So, but with audio drama, I really encourage your listeners to give it a try. It's not like a podcast, which I know we're all familiar with now because podcasts have exploded. It is a story. You don't have to be. Some people say, "Oh, does that mean I've got to be like sat in my chair and not doing anything else?" No, like I listen to a lot of audio dramas when I'm out walking or running, or if you're at the gym. Just things like that. I'd really recommend giving them a try.
Yeah, definitely. I cannot recommend them enough myself either. I mean, I'm quite a newbie really when it comes to audio dramas, but you mentioned just then about Stephen Fry, and I have heard a little bit of Stephen Fry's audio book. What I think
Mm.
it was the one about Greek mythology.
Yeah.
I've heard a really small chunk of it, and oh my god, I cannot tell you how gripping it was. It was so fascinating, and you're absolutely right. I think the author of the book, or the writer of the play, or whatever it is always going to bring that kind of sincerity and authenticity to an audio performance that perhaps an actor maybe wouldn't. Um,
Yes.
but obviously, that is why actors are employed often, because there's multiple characters that need to be conveyed in a certain way. And like you said before about Big Finish, they will, if they're looking for a Welsh actor with a certain vocal quality, they'll go through their sort of list of actors that they know, and they'll say, right, Joe Bloggs or whatever is the one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Big up the audiobooks and audio dramas, man.
Yeah,
Like
man.
there's a lot of work there for actors as well. And I think at the moment, something we've spoken about recently is this is about the sort of broadcasting world, and how in 2025, hopefully things will improve, and from the state that they're currently in, because it seems that there are less opportunities all round for creatives at the moment. And a lot of the bigger broadcasting companies are, well, would you say they've been quite upfront about how they're feeling about that? And in terms of like next year is the kind of, survive till 2025 sort of thing. It's almost like they've said, in the meantime, we are struggling a little bit. They've been quite upfront about it, would you say?
I think it's more the people who work for them rather than like the top brass of,
Mm.
say, the BBC or Channel 4. I've seen a lot this year, sadly, particularly in like the behind the scenes realm. So, like, camera operators and people who just work behind the scenes. I've seen a lot of posts this year saying, oh, I could reliably get a gig every month. Now I haven't had a gig for 6 months. And these are people who've been in the game for 20, 30, 40 years. I think Beck 2, the union that represents them, have said, I can't remember the exact figure, but it was more than half, they said, of their members were either like, not employed or struggling to find work. And it is hard. I think the reality is, in the last few years, like with the inflation we've seen, but I think it's not just inflation. TV and film is just generally becoming more expensive to make across the board. Like that's worldwide, no matter where you are. And, I think here in the UK, we are known for making some standout stuff. Programs and films that we make are sold all over the world. It's one of the things I think we can be the most culturally proud of. But the reality is, we don't have the endless pockets of Hollywood. to do this. Not even the biggest broadcasters. Obviously, the BBC is primarily funded by the license fee, and there's the whole debate about that. But even the commercial companies, ITV, Channel 4, they don't have infinite amounts of money. So they're really having to pick and choose. And I think that's why you're seeing a lot of repeats on telly at the minute. I know there's a big cause saying, well, there's too many repeats. Repeats are killing telly, but you can see why they're doing it. If they're repeating popular programs that people are still going to watch, it saves them money. It's why you see favorites still being commissioned. Like, it's no shade on it, but the quiz show The Chase, I think, has been running since, what was it, like 2009? So we're up to 15 years now.
Yeah.
And obviously, why do they keep making it? I get, yes, there is a cash prize, but in terms of production, it's a relatively cheap show to produce. It's one set, all that sort of stuff. That's why they're popular. And I think for newer stuff, I was saying this to someone the other day, it seems to be newer stuff that does well seems to be stuff that is inherently cheaper to make, I'd argue. Things like, say, The Traitors. Now, I don't know how much The Traitors has cost, but that's become like its own little phenomenon. But
Mm.
with it being based in a reality show, outside of hiring the location, I can't imagine it's overwhelmingly expensive to produce compared to, say, the dramas are the money eaters. That's no secret. Like, the cost of making drama is enormous. And there's, fears that even the longest running ones, like Casualty, for example, which in a couple of years is going to turn 40, there's rumors and speculation that that might bite the dust once the 40th anniversary is cleared, which would be a huge shame. I used to watch it quite avidly, and I do think it's one of those good breeding grounds for new actors to get a start in telly and behind the scenes folk as well. We've already lost a few of those, like we lost Doctors this year, which again was like a bastion for new talent to come in. We've lost Holby City as well, which was another one. So, I think as the costs go up, it is gonna become a squeeze. And I think sometimes people jump too quickly to aim at the broadcasters saying, oh, well, why have they cancelled it, without really looking at the reasons? Because yes, it's awful. When something gets cancelled, anyone listening who's had a project cancelled will know this. It's sad for yourself. It's sad for the team involved. Like, it's awful. But and this might sound fairly like cold or logical, but at the end of the day, like, if these are all businesses, they have to operate. And even if the morally thing or the right thing or the people want to do is to carry it on, if it's going to drive them into the ground, then it's just going to end anyway. So I know that sounds really harsh and really difficult, but I do think that's where these companies, these production companies, the broadcasters, that's what they're having to look at, because they don't want to drive themselves too much into the red. But you can only hope things are going to, the old song, things can only get better. You hope so. I do think more cancellations are going to come. Sadly, I don't think we're through the worst of it yet, but hopefully maybe next year we'll turn some sort of corner.
Yeah, definitely. And to me, at least, I think what has happened in the last sort of year, 2 years, is that the shows and films that we're seeing are actually perhaps a little bit more ambitious than they were before. I think that kind of happened to a lot of creatives, a lot of companies really sort of, I don't know what, they hit the ground running after lockdown, I think. And this momentum, of creating ambitious work has really started to continue now. Thinking along the lines of like Brassic, for instance, that's a comedy series that is filmed in the northwest of England. That there's a lot of new talent and younger actors that have been given opportunities to star and feature in that show. It's a new piece of writing. I mean, it has been running for like 6 seasons now or something like that, but I think it is very ambitious. And, there's a lot of shows that are like that, where it is new. It is perhaps very different to what we've seen before from the bigger broadcasters. But I think, again, it's the right way to go in one respect, because you're making new work that's a new platform for a whole different bunch of creatives that maybe haven't had an opportunity in TV and film before. But it's also very interesting to watch. As brilliant as dramas can be, whatever they are, crime dramas or things like the Peaky Blinders, which I love Peaky Blinders. We want to see different stuff. That's where, if you can get a new hit TV show like that, like Alma's Not Normal as well is a perfect example. That's the writer, it's all about kind of um her life really, but
Mm.
it's all about the comedy. And she said in an interview recently that she wanted to just kind of celebrate and embrace all the different walks of life that she has encountered in her life to give them opportunities in this show. And I
Mm.
think that is absolutely wonderful. You know, we need more of that basically, that we need ambitious new work, we need diverse voices, we need working class voices, because there isn't really enough or as many as there should be in TV, I don't think, as a working class person. But yeah, it's really interesting. I think, you know, you've made a video about it on your YouTube channel, and a lot of people have commented on that with their thoughts. It is an interesting topic, really. But I mean, we've gone on a massive tangent there. Oh my goodness me! This is why I love podcasts. You end up talking about absolutely everything.
Absolutely.
But let's briefly touch upon you doing panto this Christmas, because you'll be at Cast in Doncaster as you were last year.
Aye,
Um, Tell us about the show. Which pantomime are you
aye.
doing?
So we're doing Jack and the Beanstalk this year, and I will be part of the senior ensemble. So I'll be like your background characters, like say villagers or all those sorts of people. I'm also an understudy, so I'm covering the Dame, which is what's her name? Dame, I think she's Dolly, Dame Dolly Trot, and I'll be covering her son, Silly Billy. I think some people, when they understudy, there's an expectation that if they are called, that they'll go on the stage with book in hand, which a lot of theatres do. Now, my personal take, if it's an emergency and say if it's a show where you don't have understudies normally and you draft someone in last minute, sure, I'm not going to expect someone to learn a whole script in an evening. But I think if you're part of the production, if you've been in rehearsals, yes, you might be playing an ensemble character, but if you're in rehearsals, then I would argue you should at least have a knowledge enough that you wouldn't really need the script on stage. Because even though everyone goes, oh, well, it's panto and, we all make it up anyway. I've seen pantos where people have taken books on stage and I know they've been part of the production from day one. And it just ruins the whole thing. It ruins the immersion. It ruins the atmosphere you're trying to create. So outside of emergencies, I'm not really a fan of book in hand. So when I did it last year, and I'll be doing the same this year, I learned my two understudy roles before rehearsals started, because for me, I felt I want to have a knowledge of what this is about should I be asked for it. And, there's no guarantee. I think some people think, there are some shows where, namely when it's like celebrities, they might say, oh, well, I'm taking Sunday off. And that's when you go on as an understudy. We don't have any celebrities in our panto, which I think is all for the better. I'm a big fan of casting regular actors, but that's a whole other debate. But the only time they're not performing is if they're ill or if they can't do it. And in the last year, I only had to cover it once. We did 51 shows. I had to cover the Dame once due to a last minute back injury. He's fine, by the way. This year, we've got 61 shows. Obviously, at this point, as we're recording in October, I might never put on the Dame's dress or be Silly Billy. I don't know. Like, it's all to, but I want to be prepared. So that's what I'm mainly doing. But I'm also going to be the voice of the giant, which is going to be
Ooh.
really good fun. And it's interesting. At this stage, I've no idea whether it's going to be pre-recorded or if they want me to do it like live from the side of the stage. We've recently got the script, and I can't see anything in the stage directions that denotes if it's either. And I was thinking actually there'd be pros and cons to each. Like obviously if it's pre-recorded, you don't have to worry about it because it's just going to play out. But then I think the con of that is it's going to be the same every time. There's not going to be that much variation. Whereas doing it live, I think would the con is obviously then you've got to add that to everything else that you do. You might be like changing costume as you go in fee fi fo fum. But I think outside of that, the pro is you can, like all the other actors, you can vary it up each show. You can do different things with it. So I'm open to either. I don't know which one it will be, but yeah, I'm looking forward to getting started. We start in about a month's time.
Nice. It's such an exciting time of year, you know, being in any panto. And I think we often say it as actors, Christmas is like a prime time for us to get work. And
Yes.
also pantomime is such an important uh, medium of theatre and performance for families, for young people, for children, for audiences that have additional needs or might have sensory issues. You know, having things like a relaxed performance of a pantomime can be such an enjoyable experience for those people. And I know that's something that you had at Cast last year, and I'm sure you'll have again this year. Quite a lot of theatres do have relaxed performances. And if you're somebody that maybe, you know, you've got ADHD, autism, or you've got a family member or a friend with a disability, like they are such welcoming environments. I cannot recommend them enough.
Mm.
They are really, really fantastic. But yeah, pantomime is one of those legendary kind of performances where I think if you see a good one and you see it done right
Mm.
and well by the actors, it can really, really make a difference
Oh, absolutely.
to your life and your sense of like joy and well-being. It is escapism at its finest. And like you were saying then about understudies, I mean, understudies these days need to get a little bit more appreciation, I think, personally. Often they're taking on, you know, the learning of lines for many characters, and it can be very, very stressful but also very enjoyable. Often these people that take on the understudy roles or alternate characters, they have such a varied skill set like yourself. But it is, I think I've never seen somebody in a pantomime go on with book in hand if they've been stepping up to the plate as an understudy for a role. But I think for me, similar to yourself, Adam, like I would genuinely, I'd be like, that's taken me out of it.
Yeah, well,
It's yeah, I think it. Yeah, I just don't think I would enjoy it as much because I'd be too conscious of the fact that they've got a script in their hand and they're not maybe as familiar with the role as as the, you know, the main person playing it.
yeah, I mean, I will say as well, like, I think that thing of what I pointed out about book in hand, I'd argue that is in the minority. You know, most pantos I've seen where understudies, most shows that I've seen where understudies go on do know their stuff, you know, they've prepped properly. But, you know, I do think, you know, there are those who don't for whatever reason. And I think, well, it's not really serving like the role of an understudy very well. It's not really serving you very well. So to anyone out there listening, if you ever do an understudy role, I'd advise just, you know, preparing as much as you can, either beforehand or during the rehearsal process, because you know what there might be, you know, what if you have to cover and then the producers actually, no, I don't want you to use the book in hand, and you haven't learned anything, then that's a whole different kettle of fish. But no, I'm very grateful to be part of the panto again. Obviously it's the same kind of role I did last year, but I did very much enjoy it. So that'll be fun to do again, get to hone my dance skills again, because you know, out of dancing, singing, acting, I'd say dance is probably my weakest, but I try not to let that, you know, prevent me from doing the challenge. And clearly the producers and the team have very kindly felt I must have done an okayish job last year to be asked back to do it again. So yeah, any chance like that. I mean, we work with a choreographer called Jazz who runs her own dance school as well for kids. And, you know, you hear horror stories sometimes about the world of dance and how teachers can be very like unsympathetic or like there's no mercy or whatever. Jazz, from my experience, was the complete opposite. She was very accepting that I wasn't like as natural a dancer as maybe the other ensemble members, or even the kids outdanced me like 3-1. I'll never compete on their level. But no, she was just very good. She was very patient, and you know, it got to a point where I could reliably do these routines every single show to somewhat of a degree that looked good. And you know, that was something that maybe at the start of the process I might have thought, oh God, like, am I actually gonna be able to do this? And you know what? Day one of this year, I'll probably go in and have that same fear again when we're told like what songs we're doing and all that. But you know, I just sort of trust with the rehearsal time and with the right guidance, it'll come. It'll come.
I like that. And I totally relate to that as well. Like, I originally trained in musical theatre at college, and then when auditioning for drama school, I was auditioning for both acting courses and musical theatre courses. Now, not a lot of people do that. And I think for me, I was very much interested in maintaining my ability in singing, and I wanted to further that. But dancing was always something that I really enjoyed, but I just wasn't the best at. And I think it was purely because I'd not had the experience in it when I was younger. I never did any classes in it. It was something that I started really when doing, it was Manchester Stage Experience, actually, at the Palace Theatre and the Opera House. That was really my first sort of taste of dance. And I remember when I first started, I was terrible at picking up choreography. I had 2 left feet. I had a good rhythm. Like I think because I listened to music a lot, I was good at harmonies. I could sing. I think I had this kind of sort of understanding of rhythm and, moving to a certain beat. But it was remembering all of the moves really that I struggled with. But that's amazing that you found that kind of, it's a safe and encouraging space for you to learn whilst on the job as well. I think that's really refreshing, because often, me and Jenny chatted about this in the first episode back on the podcast. We were saying that Jenny has really built confidence whilst going to dance lessons recently in probably the past year. And the teacher that she's got is very much of the mindset that, just go for it. It's not supposed to be perfect. You're supposed to enjoy it. And I think if you can enjoy what you're doing, you're always going to, put your best foot forward and give your best kind of performance, even if you're not the best dancer in the world. I think that's really nice that you've got that. And yeah, I mean, we can't wait to see you in Pantomime. I'll be there, obviously, front row seats, no doubt. But
with bells on.
Yeah, definitely. But it's a really lovely panto as well at Cast. And when I watched it last year, I was surrounded by a huge school group. And I remember thinking, oh my God, this is going to be a nightmare because there's loads of kids. But the kids absolutely loved it. They were participating at all the right moments, and they just really enjoyed the colours, the music, everything, the costumes. I think the production values at Cast are really brilliant, so cannot recommend that pantomime enough. But yeah, I think that is a really lovely place to end this podcast. Thank you so much, Adam, for joining me today and just waxing lyrical about all things creative. No,
it's a pleasure. I love to gab, so thank you for giving me the opportunity to gab away. And I just hope for you listening out there, you found it just as interesting or entertaining as I have been on it.
Thank you, Adam. And thank you to our lovely, lovely listeners. If you're returning to listen to Adam's podcast today, it really, really means a lot. It really does. And we've absolutely loved putting this podcast together, and just the whole relaunch. It's been the feedback has been so lovely. I cannot even put into words how grateful we are for your comments and your shares, everything. It really means the world. But yeah, leave a like, leave a comment. You can comment on Spotify, YouTube. If you've got any questions, for us, drop a question in the comments for either us or for Adam. Pick his brains about all things audio drama, pop culture, music, anything you want. Adam, just before we go, where can we find you on social media?
So best place to start, I guess, is YouTube. Just type in Adam Martyn with a Y, not an I, and I should pop up there. You can check out my stuff, subscribe if you like. We'd love to have you aboard the channel. On the socials, Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, my @ is Adam Martyn AMTV, so you can go and give us a follow there if you like. I'm also on Instagram at Adam Martyn Smith 9. You can follow me and my various shenanigans there. Yeah, they're the main places, I guess.
Amazing. Thank you again, Adam, and thank you everyone for listening. We'll see you next time on the next podcast. Ciao.
See you later.